All right, so any updates on Build Tool community outreach?
I think that DPP is lining things up to sort of revamp. I'm trying to think. I think it was DPP. He's lining things up to revamp with some of the OpenJDK people after the break. There's something else that's going on that has slipped my mind. I do apologize. There was another sort of, oh, Ava, I think you were pulling this in together with Maven folks.
Yes, with everything else going on, that'll be also after the holidays, but they are interested in chatting.
Cool.
Yeah, the Maven people are interesting. Not as interesting as they were before their founder left, but still interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The founder of Sonatype was the original brain behind Maven, and he was, while Maven seems super obvious today, he was way ahead of his time. Way ahead of his time, and like many such people, highly opinionated. And so yeah, one of those people you run into is like, it sounds like you're crazy, but given your track record, I'm going to take that insanity with a grain of salt.
Cool. Anything else? All right. Well, moving on, a reminder to please fill out the doodle poll for a new meeting time. Several, well, by several, I mean two people have brought up in the Slack channel that we do want to keep the time accessible for Europe. I heartily agree. We also want to keep the time accessible for the West Coast of the US as well. So we will not find a time that is ideal for everyone, but finding a time that is at least not brutal, I think will be key. So please, as a reminder, please go ahead and fill out that doodle poll, and we'll see what we can do to make it just slightly inconvenient for everyone.
Yeah, and I think shunting a few more folks towards that is also going to be somewhat helpful. I know that there are several folks who are participants in the community who haven't chimed in yet, who are sort of very active participants and who often prevent us from doing things like stomping the SPDX meeting, which we never really want to do. So I expect that we'll still be flogging this a little bit into the new year before we can figure out a time. But thank you so much for getting the doodle poll going.
You bet. Yep. So everyone in this meeting, if you haven't filled out that poll, please go ahead and do so. All right. Any updates on volunteers to help with social media?
So Brathy, who couldn't make it here today, has been dutifully posting the meeting videos. And I think, Chris, you were kind enough to volunteer to take up the Twitter stuff, and I just need to sort out why it is that the credentials in OnePass are not actually working for you. And we can follow that up over Slack. And that's mostly been me not reaching out. So,
well, that's me not pushing either. So don't take full blame.
Yeah, I find the life goes better when I just presume that most of the problems are on my end.
Fair enough.
Certainly reduces it certainly reduces my probability of making an ass of myself.
And of course, as everybody knows, we can blame Ed for everything else too.
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely available for all of that. And there's a decent chance it actually is my fault. An enormous number of things are.
All right. Cool. All right. Blame Ed for stuff. Duly noted. Reminder, as mentioned. Oh, sorry. Any updates on the request for feedback on this blog post?
So I know you had mentioned at one point, Chris, the possibility of maybe getting some interested folks together at a breakout meeting. Is that still desirable as a way to try and nudge this forward? Because I feel like a whole bunch of good stuff got done, and then we sort of ran out of steam.
Yeah, and like the steam isn't back.
That's also a completely fair position.
I also lack the steam, and the timing gets ever more interesting with things like the European Cyber Resiliency Act and some of the stuff they're talking about, some of the commentary that I'm expecting US Gov folks to put out, like calls for feedback in the new year. We're definitely going to want to say something. It is a testament to the awesomeness of what we've done here that some of the folks in DC definitely know GitBOM by name and want our opinion on some things.
Nice.
So we should, if possible, find, even if it's a small, slimmed down version of our great idea for this blog post, get something up there in January.
Well, and I guess the question is, do we want to do something even as a small, slimmed down something in correlation with the mechanics of rename? Because rebranding is challenging in the best of times. And so like drawing attention around the rename with something very cogent to say might be really good.
So not this week, Ed. What's your schedule like the rest of the year? I guess when are you done for the year?
So technically I'm done for the year after this meeting. But the thing to realize on that is, this is not in the same nature of work as internal design doc reviews and that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if in fact there is a time that can be worked out over Slack to get folks together to go play on this that's after this meeting, I can be pretty flexible overall outside of the actual holiday days themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I expect anyone to take me up on it, but as a teetotaler, I'm even actually functional on January 1st.
Yeah, no,
which is not true for most people.
I mean, I won't be hungover, but I won't be functional as it's a Sunday, I think.
Honest to God, nothing's really going to happen over the next 2 weeks. That's so critical to anybody's lives that people shouldn't take breaks. And that includes you, Ed.
Yes. I said in sometime in January, I'm thinking like, mid to late January. Though for my own availability to jump on a meeting and work on this, I would be back on the conference circuit mid-January to mid-February.
Okay, so basically now, and then skip a couple of weeks, and then we have some availability.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm okay working on it next week a little bit, and I might. Let me add it to my list for next week of things I need to touch.
Could we start with a HackMD and put down maybe a 2 or 3 sentences of the main points we want to make, or quick bullets of the main points we want to make?
Have that in the Google Doc.
Yeah,
I will find it then.
There-ish.
And these are the hacks that we, myself, Chris, Ed, a few others contributed bullet points, even several paragraphs. There's many good paragraphs there that are the start of something, but it's not finished. I think it just needs the steam to push it to the finish line and then get it out there.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. By the way, Elliot, thank you again for the intervention. I'm getting progressively better. I was once threatened by an SVP with disabling all of my accounts if I didn't go on PTO. That was the bottom of it all, I think. And
this group can just.
too.
This group will. I was going to say this group will just DDoS you and bugger your code.
I was about to say there's ways to get you off the internet, sir.
Yes.
All right, so we're thinking January, mid-January or so for doing this meeting. Cool.
Yeah, if folks want to poke at the Google Doc of ideas, add some more, do some constructive massaging of that prose over the holidays, that's on you. That's your own decision. More power to you if that's what brings you holiday cheer. But yeah, let's focus on it a little more in January.
If you do and you regret it, blame Ed.
Blame it on exactly. Just blame Ed.
All right, cool. Moving forward, kind of along those lines, we have canceled the meetings on December 21st and 28th. They will resume on January 4th. I will still be on leave for the first week of January, so I will see all of you the week after.
So I do want to ask a question. How many folks are actually going to be back the week of January the 4th? because I have other communities that I'm involved in that have also canceled that week. Now,
Yeah.
I'm currently intending to be back that week, but if it's just going to be Chris and I on the call, much as I enjoy his company,
It could
then,
just be, we could work on the blog post in that case, if it's.
well, actually, that's not a bad idea, actually. So basically, if we get under attendance on January 4th, that is going to magically turn into the blog post meeting.
I will probably be around, and it is also usually a very slow week for me and all the communities I work with.
Same. Yeah, most of my community stuff isn't picking back up until the week after that. But I feel like that's a perfect opportunity to take advantage of energy that I have. You know, like don't erase the spot on my calendar is what I'm saying.
All good. Sounds good.
All right.
Cool.
Cool. Continuing to move forward, reviewing from previous meeting, getting GitBOM Gitoid added to CVE / adopted by MITRE. We do not have Andrew at this meeting, so I'm thinking we will postpone that until he is able to attend. Is there anything else to discuss on the rule of 2? Because I know we've got the file system persistent PR merged. Are we considering the rule of 2 complete?
I was considering it to be complete. I'm happy for the people of other views.
I think it is. I think it's done. I think we can take it off the standing agenda.
Yeah, the only reason I actually put it on today's agenda was to take note of the fact that it was complete.
Awesome.
So.
All right. Celebration
Woo.
for that.
Virtual high
Yay.
fives.
Cool. All right. To embed or not to embed, that is the question. And we've got the embed mode PR. Ed, do you want to take over? And is there stuff you want to walk through on this today?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly walk through this. Do you want me to go ahead and share for the walkthrough?
Sounds good.
Let me do that. 1 second. It's not a huge set of changes, fortunately. But I want to make sure we do start talking through some of it, because my gut is this may be the last piece for getting the initial spec done.
And Ed is prepared for my pushback.
Well, I welcome your pushback. It ends up being valuable. But I have this very odd notion that good results come out of tension in systems, and so I get nervous when there's no pushback, not when there is pushback. So effectively, this came out of a sort of discussion about wanting to be able to use GitBOM in scenarios where you don't actually want to embed the GitBOM document ID into the resulting artifact. So one example of this that Young Kui brought up that I actually really like is sort of what I call the retrospective use case, which is you've got a bunch of Debian files that are out in the wild that have been installed on millions of systems and that are reproducible in terms of their builds. And you would like to generate the GitBOM documents for them. But if you generate the GitBOM documents for them, you're going to produce a different artifact if you do embed mode. Whereas if you do it without embed mode and you get exactly byte for byte the same deb file, then you sort of know you've done it correctly. And so towards that end, my suggestion was effectively the following. There's sort of 2 pieces to this. The first is in the spec, where we have this place in the spec. Let me actually expand this out a little bit, where we basically, for GitBOM identifier embedding, each build tool should embed into the output artifact a new line terminated lexically ordered list of GitBOM identifiers for each mandatory artifact type in a manner appropriate to the type of artifact and generally agreed upon for that artifact. And then this just adds, unless the user indicates the desire not to embed the GitBOM identifier by either setting a GitBOM no embed environment variable to a non-empty value. I'll just make I apparently wrote this too fast. Or using a build tool specific flag was sort of the suggestion. Effectively, we'd like a sort of generally accepted way to indicate that we don't want embedding to occur. But then build tools may have their own way they want to do this, but build tools are very sneaky about how they feel about the number of dashes involved and that kind of thing. So that was the first piece. Do we want to go ahead and talk through this really quickly and see how people feel about that?
Any opinions on that?
I will hold my opinions until the end.
Okay, that's fine. So the other thing that comes out of this is, in the case of a non-embed mode, the stuff that we had talked about previously here, and apologies, I just saw, oh wait, this only came in 2 minutes ago, so I don't feel so bad about not having noticed Young Kui's comment. When you look at the section that we had built up around build tool persistence of artifact to GitBOM document mapping, previously, the way we had been doing this, it was single valued. An artifact ID mapped to a symlink to the GitBOM document for that artifact. However, in the case of no embed mode, it is possible that you will have multiple GitBOM documents that map to the artifact ID. And so here, this has simply been changed to effectively any problem can be solved by an additional layer of interaction, where we had this piece here that had previously been the symlink itself representing the artifact. It's now a directory in which we embed the identity of the GitBOM ID as the symlink to the GitBOM document for the artifact. And it's easier to see in an example where effectively before, and I did fix the underscores here, before you would have had something where a2dg, gitoid blob, SHA1, et cetera, you know, effectively the artifact ID piece here identifying the artifact itself. Now you have gitoid blob, SHA1, the artifact ID, and then a piece that actually points to the that has the same identifier as the gitoid. And I think I actually screwed up the example here. I need to fix the example. Did that make sense to folks? Effectively, you have a directory of possible gitoid document identifiers.
The premise is any built artifacts, every unique build artifact could have multiple build processes that result in the same binary. And you're trying to capture that multiple trees of gitoids, you know, distinct GitBOM documents could reference the same generated artifact.
In the no embed case, yes. That won't happen in the embed case because of the embedded GitBOM ID. But in the no embed case, it could happen.
It could happen in an embed case as well if the input, if the artifacts which are built together into the output artifact do not have embedded GitBOM IDs, GitBOM document IDs. If we're starting whole cloth from code, from raw text source files that have no embedded, then this is true. But if we are an intermediary step, and some of our inputs are already built and did not have GitBOM tooling when they were built, then this gets even more messy.
Yeah, that's not a happy thought.
But that is the scenario that this is trying to address, is stuff already in the wild.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I also want to point out that there are two distinct, there's concerns I have around the spec defining environment variable flags for tools. And then there's this issue. Those are separate issues. For those, I have a general concern about the spec stepping into stepping down a slippery slope of defining environment variable names and behavior. In my experience, tool authors in different ecosystems tend to have their own local paradigms for how to do that. And you know, they might not want to conform to a spec that says what variable name they should use in their tool.
So, right, and I will note, not by way of expressing an opinion on your point at all, that would also probably bring into question stuff around GitBOM dir as well.
I am less concerned about GitBOM dir because file system is an API, and yes, environment variables are a pseudo API. Meh.
So you are thinking that using environment variable is a bad idea? Is that a little confused?
No, using an environment variable is absolutely appropriate, but defining in the spec how other communities of tool developers should write their tools.
Right. I mean, we are just a recommendation, right? Just like the reproduce build, right? They require or recommend using those environment variable to get the reproduce build property, right? That's something that's already in use by the reproduce build community, right?
So I think part of it comes down to sort of like which kinds of communities you're looking at. So to take for an example, the folks who build C compilers, there's a whole bunch of traditional C compiler environment variables that are, for all intents and purposes, API in the modern world, right? C flags, LD flags, those sorts of things. But then you also have a tendency in other build communities, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Eva, Docker is an example of this, where every environment variable that they interact with is prefixed with Docker underscore.
I am not 100% certain that Docker continues to do that, but that is certainly a paradigm I've seen some communities adopt.
Well, and there's even tooling in the Go ecosystem that actually encourages that. So, for example, Kelsey Hightower has written an astonishingly good environment variable configuration library that's just dead simple, called env config. And the very first thing you tend to do there is say, this is my environment variable prefix. Exactly. And I have not looked to see how hard it is to back away from that. Knowing Kelsey, not super hard. But
it is a common paradigm in different language tooling to use a language specific prefix on your environment variables to avoid conflicts.
So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that's sort of mulling through my head on this is, yeah, so we got two issues. We got at least two issues here. There's the to environment variable or not to environment variable issue. And then I think we've got the issue around the handling of no embed, which I think produces some additional complications here. You seem to be commenting here, Nkui, that you think that the case of multiple GitBOM documents will be relatively rare. And since you've beaten on this a lot, I'll take that at face value. And I think you're suggesting that we normally keep it just in the simpler file-based format, but then have a branch where we deal with relative symlinks to GitBOM documents for the artifact if we have more than one. And then we keep the latest symlink here.
Yeah.
There's something in my gut, and I'm curious if it's going out other people's guts, that's just starting to feel like this is getting very complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, it's starting to feel very complicated. And
this also opens the Pandora's box of some build tools do things like strip comments or white space or condense files in pre-built steps, which is functionally not changing the output. And so the binary will still be the same, but the hash ID of that file after the pre-build step is done will be different. And so even in those cases, you might have very different hash trees and GitBOM documents created in your own tool chain at different steps for the same outputs. Right? I can do a hello world example with 10 different hello world files that all compile to exactly the same binary.
Right. So there,
I actually have a problem that's here today with that, because I've been adding GitBOM support into a tool that I've been working on called Witness. And when the compiler starts to produce GitBOM attestations, we're also producing in Toto-based attestations, and we want to tie them together. And we are tying to the Gitoid in that scenario. But that also then begs the question, when we produce the documentation that includes how all of the additional things that we observed as part of that, do we end up having to keep it all separate and just tie it directly to the in-toto attestation, or do we end up with multiple GitBOM documents that tie into the same output binary, so that way that it can then be traced to those things? So there's definitely some difficulty there.
Yeah. Could I make a suggestion? I feel like I'm going to adopt a hat that usually Null adopts, because we do have a couple of other things around the renaming that I think we should discuss. The embedding stuff is feeling more complicated to me in terms of how to resolve the question. And would it make sense then we have this road to initial spec, right? We've got the FS persistent stuff. We've got the fixed name changes to Oberon. I would suggest sort of we reverse these two. So clip this out here in the order and say, look, let's do the fixed names, fixed changes to Oberon, because hopefully that's relatively mechanical. And then revisit the embed mode question. Does that feel reasonable to folks? And I think we all need to noodle a little bit on it and the implications.
I think that does sound reasonable. I also wonder, if we can try as much as possible to push the discussion on this asynchronously, because this feels like something where people need to think a lot as they respond and work through it. And I think it might work better to do that asynchronously than synchronously.
Yeah, and we've got the PR is a good place to talk about this, and the PR comments I think work well there. So I mean, the other thing is we've got the road to the initial spec piece here, and so we've got a relatively limited number of things, I think, before we get to the point where we have something that's in decent shape. I know we have this open conversation, Ava, that I don't want to suppress, but I'm not sure we want to have now about when to push it to SDOs.
Yeah.
And which SDOs and how?
The which SDOs and hows, I'm happy to defer, but there is one more thing that I really want us to do before I feel confident that we're not going to have major changes. And this embed mode discussion has stirred one. The other one is non-compiled language environments. Right.
Well, I think there are two dimensions there. The two dimensions there, I think, aren't so much compiled, non-compiled, although there's a little bit of that. But I think the more complicated part is going to be dynamically loaded versus non-dynamically loaded, right?
That too. We have a matrix.
Yeah, because from a dynamically loaded point of view, Java is very, very compiled, but it's also very dynamically loaded. Whereas Python is technically also compiled, but doesn't get thought about that way. So.
Well, there's also an interesting intersection. What if the bug is in the compiler itself?
That reopens an interesting discussion that I think we'd had about putting build tools and their configuration into the tree. I don't know if we want to have that discussion. I don't know at what stage we want to reopen that discussion. Do you remember when we were talking about that?
I do remember that. And one of the things that I've been working on in my day job is if we think about supply chain, it's an entirely different attack surface and attack mechanism than we're used to. So we're, kind of the attack surfaces and attack mechanisms that we've been looking at have been related to stuff that Kevin Mitnick did, the social aspects, and the stuff that Robert Morris did with the Robert Morris worm. With the exception of denial of service, the mechanisms for attack have evolved from those two roots. I think supply chain is a third one. And so as I've been modeling what the attack surface is and what the potential attack mechanisms are, figuring out where something malicious can be inserted is important. And so I'm not trying to revive the conversation, but what I'm trying to do is drop into everybody's brain the fact that this one might be different. And if this one is different, how do we model the differences in attack, in attack vectors, attack mechanisms into what we're building so that we preemptively build a better defense?
An interesting point you make. And also considerations of compiler-driven attacks into a supply chain go back to the 80s and 70s with Ken Thompson's work.
So really quickly, do you want me to pass the agenda back to you, Mel?
Sure.
I just realized I sort of walked away with the meeting by mistake, and I
It's
apologize.
okay.
That was not my intention, especially since you tend to be better at running it than I do.
No, it's all good.
And let me actually stick in. I've taken a note as to the. I took a note with the question about the build tools, and I've actually got, I think, an issue related to that I'll link in there as well.
So also one thing for build tool, right? So I think probably we can utilize the reproducible build property, right? If that's the case, usually whenever you build like Debian package, right? They create a building info file that actually have the list of build environment that contains GC, the compiler version, that kind of thing. Can we utilize that directly without adding more information to our GitBOM?
So really quickly, because I do want to get onto the website from a time point of view, but really quickly, because I want to go down this particular rabbit hole at this moment. I think the thing we had talked about, or at least that I had proposed on before, was that we allow the build tool, we have a relatively standard way for the build tool to insert an element into the tree that says, hi, I'm the build tool. This is my version. This is optionally my GitBOM ID. And then also allow it to insert a file for its configuration information, meaning these are the things that I consider to be non-ephemeral configuration for me. And for tools that use the build info stuff, if they choose to use that to represent their configuration, that would be a perfectly valid way of going about it. For like a package build tool, like the Debian build tools. Did that answer your question quickly?
I think the GitBOM ID for GC compiler can be probably easily inserted into the build info file for the Debian build. Is that what you're saying?
Not quite, but let's take that offline.
Okay,
Because I think we probably should get on to the rename process.
sure.
I'll post some of my thoughts here on Slack because there's some complexities here that go beyond just including the top level environment variables. But I'll post that on Slack for people to read.
All
Or
right.
on Slack or an attachment to the issue, if that makes sense there as well.
Yeah, issue could work as well. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Either way, but possibly poke at Slack when you comment to it, encourage people to go look at the comment. That would be good. Sorry,
Okay,
Nelson,
I'll do that instead.
probably just didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all good. All right, let's move on to the website update tasks. Or the Omnibor update tasks.
Yeah, the Untitled Chapter test. So do you want to go ahead and click on the preview? So
Ooh.
Pretty logo.
I'm glad you like it. It's a little bit detailed for a logo, but I happen to have it on hand. So, and it was something that I had paid to have created in a different context, so I know that its IP is clean. So what you'll find for the most part is that this looks pretty much the same. It's mostly a transliteration to Omnibor. There are some small changes to the front page in terms of, it says Omnibor, formerly known as GitBOM. And what I've actually done, although the link is not working yet because I haven't made Omnibor the primary domain, is there'll be a gitbom.omnibor.io that is just the old page. So if someone comes in and like, what is this? We've got something and it backlinks them to the page that looks like the last one they looked at. One thing I would really love feedback on is, it's formerly known as GitBOM, now Universal Bill of Receipts. David Wheeler actually had a question about, hey, what does Omnibor stand for? And so if folks have simple ways to make that clear up front, like what the sort of expansion of the thing is, that would be helpful. And then I did change the blue box at the bottom. The Omnibor is not, because it's no longer implied by the name. So that got simplified a little bit.
Looking good so far.
Yeah, but there are things that make my fingers itch. Like, I'm not sure we want to call it an Omnibor ID or not going forward, but I didn't want to make changes like that in this pass. And then I also went through Ava's white paper, which we have on here as a resource, and similarly transliterated it.
Yeah, I would do your very best, even to avoid mentioning the git tag up front.
Yep. Given a rewrite like this, I think it's appropriate for me to come back and do a pretty heavy pass on this white paper again. Clean it up, remove all mention of the git tag. I agree.
I would be wholly supportive of that, but I would suggest let's do that in a follow-up PR to this PR.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of things I was doing this that made my fingers itch, because I do want to go back and clean them up given the name change. But I mostly resisted. So do folks like the color scheme? You made happy noises about the logo.
Sidebar, Elliot, do you have any concern with there being, a footnote or an appendix somewhere that talks about the origin of this as Git Merkle tree repurposing?
I have no problem with that. I just, don't lead with it. Right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, I think in fact, you can even describe what it is and say it's similar to and reference it. That's perfectly fine. It's just, you want to make sure that you don't, if you're trying to break the relationship with Git, so that the less you use the term Git, the better off you'll be.
Yep. It's sort of a footnote in the annex of our history that it happens to be, but unimportant to anyone who's coming to the project new now.
Right.
Cool. And like I said, the colors, do the colors work for folks? It's sort of a blue-green scheme now.
It generally works for me. I might run some sort of accessibility checks on it though.
Ah, that is very wise.
Yep. I would also suggest accessibility checks. It works for my particularly alien eyes. That doesn't mean it works for anybody else's eyes.
It turns out there are a wide variety of kinds of vision in the human species.
Yes. Some are close to 20 different color permutations.
The good news is there are some handy tools for this. In fact, there have been handy tools for this for a long time. I was actually impressed how early the accessibility community got on top of this, in terms of just making it dead easy to do it right. Okay, cool. So it sounds like, generally speaking, modulo, some checks on the modulo, some checks on the colorblind stuff. That we're happy with this transliteration. Not that we want to merge it. Not that we want to merge it today, mind you, because that's actually sort of the next question: is what else do we need to do, and how do we want to time it?
Yep. That was going to be my next question. Do we want to put this work in a branch on GitHub that we can make updates against? Instead of merging this candidate PR onto main, merge it onto branch, website update. And then other people can open other PRs to move in different pieces of the changes that we're discussing onto that branch, still reviewing them all until we're like, yes, there's enough stuff done here to flip the switch.
Okay, that's a much smarter suggestion that's a much smarter conversation than one that I was about to have. So yes. And the other nice thing, though, by the way, is that the way that Netlify handles this, I can actually set it up so that you could get like omnibor.gitbom.dev. And so we could actually see live how we're doing getting there as things get merged.
Great.
So how about we do this? I will go ahead and move the PR to like an Omnibor branch and set that up. And then if folks are okay with merging this onto that branch, that gives us something to hack against.
Works for me.
Sounds good.
So that was the first one. I feel like now that I'm looking at the list, these are all things that need to be done, but the timing of the switchover gets to be a more interesting question than the particulars, because most of the rest of them are fairly easy to do, like renaming various things and or things that maybe we can do in a pass after the switch, like the spec updates.
Yeah. The different account updates there's the five of them listed. That's probably best done with like, Ed, just you and I block out an hour after the website update is done, or maybe like same day we're going to flip the switch. We'll block out an hour and walk through that, because I have access to some, you have access to some, other people have access to some, but I think you and I is the minimum set of people with access to everything.
No, that's probably wise.
Block out an hour the day we're going to flip the website and move them all. I
guess in terms of timing of the switch, obviously you don't want to make a big change like this going into the break. My tendency though would be to look maybe, depending on when our folks getting back, either the week of the 10th or the week of the 17th of January, to target flipping the switch.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Does that flipping the switch also include like renaming the Git organization?
Yes, that's part of what I mean there. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that one you just want to be careful to, in terms of, I think GitHub will leave like a tombstone of some form or a redirect.
It'll do a redirect.
Up until somebody else grabs the name.
True.
And then they release the redirect.
I think you might want to think about, is that what you want, or do you want to keep a tombstone?
Yeah.
What I recommend we do is we create a new group, and then what we do is we move the repos individually to the new location, so that way we retain both the old and the new account, and the tombstones will just move over.
Yeah, this is very wise. This is actually how I've been thinking about the problem, because GitHub is GitHub is actually really good at repo moves between orgs. To the point where
but all your permissions get lost, and your followers get lost if you create a new organization, just move stuff to it. So you really want to retain the current organization and structure. If I understand correct, if I understand things correctly, maybe I'm misunderstanding things.
I don't know if I've done a name change before. No, I have not. Not like this of an org, right? Like I've done it for repos, but not orgs. I don't know what it retains.
I mean, if you move a repo from one org to another, that just means,
it's gone. Yeah,
essentially cloning.
It's gone from that org. But
I think you lose the. I don't think you can move a repo from one org to another without just cloning it, right?
No, you can't.
No, you
There's
can't.
a transfer
You can't.
process.
There is
I've
a
done it.
process.
There's literally a button to do it.
Yeah, it's like at the very
And
bottom.
I've used the button to move repos before, and it does appear. I mean, there may be some things GitHub has gotten wrong with it, but it does appear to handle it not just in terms of moving the settings and everything else. I think it moves the stars as well.
Mhm.
It moves the people who are following. It's even set up well enough that unless I, as the owner of the org from which things were moved, create a new org with a new repo with the same name, which we're obviously not going to do, it's even good enough that if I had checked out from the original org, it will make all of my changes work against the repo in the new org. It's pretty seamless on repo moves.
So I have the documentation.
Somebody put a lot
right
of
here.
effort into it. Ooh, documentation. Good.
And the documentation specifically states that issues, pull requests, wikis, stars, and watchers are also transferred. But what is not transferred are webhooks, services, secrets, or deploy keys, which remain associated after the transfer. So, so we'll have to make sure that we repopulate any secrets or similar. There's also a set of things if it's a fork or anything similar, but that shouldn't that shouldn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, I mean, I think but I think your point is right. My thinking had been and was basically move the repos to the new org, and I already have the new org in hand, right? Move the repos to the new org. On the Twitter front, because Twitter is not so smooth, I was going to look at trying to simply rename the GitBOM Twitter to Omnibor, and then obviously update the collateral in terms of the logos and icons and things like that. Obviously, we're going to want to do a good solid tweet when we go to pull that off. If there are people who are good solid twits, that would be useful to figure out. But I mean, those are the kinds of things that I've been thinking in terms of, and there's going to be a little bit of tails on it, right? So certain things are more crucial to get done more immediately than others, right? So for example, we have an infra account that we're using for the code of conduct. Obviously, we'd like to get that renamed, but if we don't get that renamed for the launch, we can get it renamed shortly thereafter.
Another thing you could do as well is pick the repository with the least stars or the least importance of those stars, like maybe the web page, and see if the stars and followers transfer over. And or we could literally create a test repository and I could follow it, and then you move it and then see what it does. And so if you want to test it, there are ways to test it.
Yep. So I think though, I think we've got a clear path forward. Does anybody who's more savvy on these things than I am have a difference of opinion between the 10th to 17th for the big announce?
So the 17th is either one of them is good for me. The 19th, I'm on an airplane again, is my only constraint. But I will be mentioning this project on a very large stage on the 20th.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we really want to make sure that cutover is done. By then.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That particular, the speaker lineup is not announced yet, but hopefully it is by the time this video is posted anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shoot then. And the other thing is, for those who follow these things, I've always been told that Tuesdays and Thursdays are your best day for making a splash about anything.
Yeah, I would love to aim for the 10th, though that is pushing us a little bit over the holidays.
I'm okay with aiming for the 10th if that's good for people.
Because that gives me a full week in, at home on my own routine to help with any massages and fixes that might be needed. Whereas the 17th, if we do it like midday on the 17th, I only have 24 hours to help out before I'm on a plane.
Well, I mean, I'll put it this way. Never issue invitations to Murphy.
Yes.
Nice.
The 10th it is then.
All right, so we'll shoot for the 10th. And I think that will sort of sharpen the mind. And I feel silly about not having thought of the branch approach, but yes, the branch approach.
Garrett would have made this harder. GitHub actually makes this pretty easy.
Yep.
For once, it's the other way around.
Cool. All right. Going back to the agenda, we already talked about moving the meeting time. Anything else anyone wanted to bring up in the last 3 minutes we have? Hearing none, I'm okay with closing a few minutes early.
I hope everyone has wonderful and happy holidays, whatever
And
they might.
safe. Yep.
Cool. Talk to you later.
See you next year.
Bye.
Bye.